Okay, so now we start with my session, Microsoft 365 Groups Uncovered. Yeah, so a few things about me. My name is Anja Schröder. I'm a Microsoft Workplace consultant, so I do a lot of stuff with SharePoint teams in the technical way, but also in the adoption way to help users to enter Microsoft 365 as well as I can. But I also do a lot of things in the German Microsoft 365 community. Maybe if you are like German things, you can look up these links. But there are only one in English, so sorry for that. So go to my session. The basics. Maybe I don't know where you come from, or if you are an admin or a user, so I will start with the basics. First things you need to know, Microsoft 365s are the absolute backbone of all collaborations in Microsoft 365. Without Microsoft 365 groups, you can't do any collaboration things. And they are basically a technical part of the collaboration because they are an object in Microsoft Entra ID and basically a list of people, of members and owners, and also a coupling to a Microsoft 365 services. So take a closer look to the services. Every time you create a Microsoft 365 group, you also create an Outlook inbox and a shared calendar. You also create a SharePoint team site in the back for file uploading. You also create a planner, a Power PI, and maybe it depends on the part where you create the M365 group. You get an Engage community, a Teams team, or a roadmap in Microsoft Project for the web. So all these things can only work with a 365 group in the back. And so all collaboration in Microsoft, nearly all collaboration in Microsoft 365 is based on these groups. So this was the thing because I decided to have a closer look to them in a whole session, and then I built the session, and I can talk about them. I think about 2-3 hours, and I compressed it into this session. Okay, first things first, creation of Microsoft 365 groups. What do you think about? When you want to create one group, you need to think about, do I need role assignment? Because you can have a role assignment in a Microsoft 365 group. Not if you create them from Microsoft Teams, but when you create them through Entra ID. So think about, do you need role assignment? Because you can only decide for role assignment in this group at the creating. There's no PowerShell, SIMDLET. There's no way to change this if the group is once created. Next thing, you have to think about the membership type. Would you like to add people, person by person, or should there be a dynamic membership? Do you need a sensitivity label? When you first heard a sensitivity label, when you heard a sensitivity label this time, the first time, I will come to this later in the session. And the last thing you think about when you create Microsoft 365 groups, you should choose at least 2 owners, because one owner maybe will leave or will be ill sometime or will be in holiday. So to manage this group, it is mandatory to have 2 owners at least. Okay, when you think about all that, and maybe you decide for a dynamic membership, then you also you have also think about these things. When you decide for a dynamic membership, you can't add manually users because you chose a dynamic query, and based on this query, members will be added automatically. So when you decide for this group, it only also can add users. It not can be added devices. And to use dynamic membership all in your tenant, you need an Entra ID P1 or P2 license, former known as Azure AD P1 Premium 1, Premium 2 licenses. Okay, maybe it's easier to have a short look in a demo. I will show you. So we are in the Entra ID Admin Center right now. I hope you see my screen right now. And then you choose identity and switch to all groups, go to the button new groups, and then you can add a new group if you have the rights for it, of course. In the group type, in this session, we don't want to build security groups. We want to build a Microsoft 365 group. And then here you can see all the parameters I ask you in front of this demo. So you can choose a group name. I will choose Teams Nation. And you see the email address is added as well. You can change them, but it's not recommended because it's easier for your users to have the group name and the group email address is the same. Then you can add a description if you like to make it more easier to understand where is the group for. Then here is the switch to decide would you like to add roles as a role-based assignment on this group. So all an example is maybe all members of this group are admins for Exchange or admins for SharePoint or something like that. So, but this switch is only right now the only possibility to switch them on. So, but I don't do it right now. Then I can choose the membership type and it's assigned, but I want to show you the dynamic users. And now you see this part switched. I switch it once again. Here is you can add members, and right now I want to add a dynamic query. So if you go to dynamic query, you can easily build a query, and it's here. Click. So here you choose a property, maybe a user type, or I think it's more easy to choose department, and then an operator like equals, and then the way you like sales. And then you say, okay, that's fine. You click here and the syntax rule is built. And then save. And with this, your dynamic query is built already, and you can add some owners, two of course, and then click create. And now you have your own group. But maybe you have seen, I will show you again, this part, sensitivity labels. Keep that in mind. I will come to this later. Okay, switch back in my, oh, where's my mouse? So switch back in the presentation. So after we created one group, maybe we first should think about who can create groups, because in your Microsoft 365 tenant, on default, all users can create groups, and this is a good thing at first, but also maybe sometimes a not so good thing, because if all users can build groups, they will build groups, and so you get a rich amount of groups in your tenant. So maybe it's sometimes a good idea to think about, hey, is it better to restrict the creation of a group? And to do that, you also need an Entra ID P1 or a P2 license. But if you restrict the configuration of Microsoft 365 group, it will restrict all groups, not only the creation of teams where the most companies I know would like to be restricted. If you restrict Microsoft 365 Microsoft 365 groups, it will restrict all services. So also the SharePoint sites, also the Viva Engage community, the planner, the roadmap, etc. So users can't build new teams, but also they can't also not build new SharePoint team sites or new planner. And keep that in mind when you chose to configure that in your tenant. So how do you do that? First, you create a group for people who still have who still should have the ability to create groups, and all people who need this ability you put in that group. It can be a security group or a Microsoft 365 group. And then you run a PowerShell command, and I link you the PowerShell command here right down below, and I will also put it in the chat. So you have the link to the CMDlet and can do this by your own. And then after run the commands, you can verify that it really works. And personal advice by myself, please add an owner, at least one in this type, for the group where the members are in who can still create Microsoft 365 group. Without an owner, it doesn't will work. So keep that in mind. Yeah, and also keep please in mind that some admin roles maybe can also create Microsoft 365 group in their admin center. So a SharePoint admin, even if he or she is not in the group, can create Microsoft 365 groups via a SharePoint team site. Yeah, so have that in mind. Okay. And a thing I find out in the last months is it matters where you create your groups, because there are some differences, especially when you show in the parameter variability in the CMDlet. So if you create a group in SharePoint, they will be different from a group built in Outlook and will be different from a group built in Power Automate. I will show you the next slide an overview about this, but the thing you need to know is that that this can lead to different behaviors from this Microsoft 365 group for your users. So in one type, when you create a group in Outlook, it will be shown in Outlook, and if you create it in Anja ID, it will be shown in Outlook for your users, and this might be a little bit different to overview. So I built a list for you. You can screenshot it or get these slides after the session. Here are three main parameters from the Microsoft 365 group. So the first one is hidden from address list enabled. So it is the group is hidden from your global address list. The second parameter is hidden from Exchange clients, so it doesn't show up in your clients in the lists on the left sides. And the last one is, I think, the biggest one, because always subscribe members to calendar events means if it's false, they aren't subscribed to this event and they aren't receive any messages like calendar invites, updates, and like this based on Outlook calendars. So if you're creating a group, think about this list and choose your place where you want to create it wisely. The next step I want to talk about are guest permissions in the Microsoft 365 group, because in default mode, there are guests in your groups allowed. So if it's possible to add guests to your tenant, it's also possible to add guests to your groups for your owner in the default mode. But you can change this. The way you can change this is go to the admin center, go to settings, the Microsoft 365 admin center, so the main admin center. Go to settings, go to org settings, go to services. I need to about the English word, and then you find the button Microsoft 365 groups, and then you see a bit like this, and you a picture like this, and you can take this ability back. Okay, you can throw this. After you decide if it's allowed to add guests to your groups or it's not allowed, maybe you have one scenario that you think it's cool that guests will be in the most groups, but not in all groups. And in the configuration I show you one slide ago, you can only choose it for your whole tenant. And there are two easy ways to configure it is more specific. So the first thing you can change the ability to add guests in your group by Microsoft PowerShell, and the second one is about sensitivity labels. So first I will show you the PowerShell way. So you can use this commands. You would put here the group name in the variable here, right here, and then you run the commands, and it will turn the add to ability to add guests from true to false, and then the owners and also the members can't add guests to this specific group, but you have to do it always for this specific group, for another specific group, and you run the commands often. The other way is, and maybe if this scenario is more than 1 or 2 times in your workday, in your organization, I think, then you can choose to create a special sensitivity label. But before I talk about how to create them, I want to talk about what are sensitivity labels. So they are configuration based on labeling, like tags, for different resources, for team sites, for teams itself, and for files. And you can configure these labels, give them some configurations, add them to a file, and the file will be more covered. So so what can you do with them? What can you protect with sensitivity label? You can choose if a team is maybe only a public team or only a private team. So you can say, if you add this label to a team, it will always be a private team. And of course, you can prohibiting guest access for the groups. You can say, if this label is enabled to this group, there is no option to add more guests. Or you can forbid external sharing on SharePoint pages, or block access for unmanaged devices if you like, if you have unmanaged devices configured. And you can also configure the default shared link for your SharePoint site, but it's only possible to build a sensitivity label with this configuration via PowerShell. So keep that in mind, but it's possible. So how to do that? You need to activate sensitivity labels in your tenant at first. So run these commands, and then they will be enabled. And then you have to activate them. Then you configure a label. Then you configure a label policy. And these days, it's really nice because after you created a new label, you will be directly guided to the possibility to create a label policy for this label. So it's not two things and it's easy to forget. So it's more one process these days. I like that. And after you configure a label policy, you have to wait maybe up to 24 hours, because if a new label policy is created, it needs some times before it shows up in your environment. And when it shows up, you can apply the label, of course. So, and this will bring us back to the demo, because I will show you this. Before this conference, I built a sensitivity label for you. I named it No Guest. And in our new group, let me add his name. I can choose the sensitivity label right now. I can always add 2 owners. I could add some members and I can create. And so with this configuration, it's not possible anymore to add some guests in this M365 group. It's really easy. So where to create these? You go to your Microsoft 365 Admin Center, you go to the Compliance Center, and need a little bit of time. And you scroll down to information protections, and here are the labels. I built one label. It's called no guests. Maybe it will show up right now. So never mind. Here are the labels, and right now. So here are my label, no guests. And after that, you create a label policy. I name the both identically, so also no guest, and put in this label policy the label no guests. And so you can activate them after waiting a few hours, and then you can use them maybe here or in your teams or whatever. Okay. Now back to the slide deck. So my tips. When you use sensitivity labels, keep in mind that when you chose a label for a SharePoint site, maybe the labels only apply to the SharePoint site, not for your lists, not for your libraries in the SharePoint site. Check that always. And also, if you apply a label to your Teams team to keep owners away from adding guest users or something else, or that the team is always private, something like that. It's only applied to the teams, not to the SharePoint side behind the teams, so not to the teams SharePoint team side, and also not to the lists and the libraries. So keep that in mind and choose wisely where you want to use the sensitivity labels. Okay, there are 2 more options. Maybe you've saw them where during our group creation. So naming policies. You can give your Microsoft 365 groups a naming policy so that every group you created starts with a special character or ends with a special configuration. Only the name, not the group itself. But often you don't want that all your groups starts with one character like G or E or whatever. You want to be more specific. So groups with guests maybe should start with an G, and groups with shared channels should start with SH or like that. Or you want like to block some words that can be used for the names of groups like private or maybe like words like this. To configuration a naming policy, you should use Microsoft Entra IDP. Not use, you should have the license from Entra ID P1 or P2, and then you can configuration a naming policy inside your Entra ID. So it looks like this, and but you have only one naming policy for your whole tenant. So it's not possible to decide between teams with or without guest users or some else configuration. You can choose dynamic suffix or prefix like in this picture, but they are also very restricted and limited and based on the user who is the creator of the M65 group. So it's also not flexible, not really helpful, I think. Yeah. So I already told you the downsides because maybe I doesn't like the naming policy in Microsoft 365 so much. So we can skip this slide and go to the next one, because what to do? My first advice is don't use the naming policy out of your tenant so like it is. I don't like it, because when you choose a fixed character, like all groups should start with an G, it will always appear, even if you build a new Outlook group, a new I would like to say Gemma, but it's engaged right now, an engaged community or a team site. So your SharePoint team site will be starts with maybe G minus, and then the real the name you want to have for this team site. And that is not good when all of your team site starts with an G or an E or something else. It's not flexible enough. So my advice is don't use it out of the box. Maybe, but I like naming policies itself. So, but build a clever naming policy by your own. Maybe create a Power App or a Forms document or something else where your users can be guided through a process to fill out a form, and with all parameters for a Microsoft 365 group, like who's the owner, who are the two owners, is it a private or a public group, are there guests in it, which location does this group have, etc. And then, based on these answers, a Power Automate workflow will build the Microsoft 365 group for the user. So it is a more a more clever way, I think. So use naming policies, but don't use the naming policies built in Entra ID. I don't like them. They are not flexible enough for our working load. And now we are looking to the expiration policies. It's also in your Entra ID. It's also in the region from creating groups, and I will show you right now where. And but before I will show you, I will talk about why it's clever to have some expiration policy. When you are an administrator of and tenant, and there are more and more and more groups, and maybe it's not your first year, it's your second or fifth year maybe, and the tenant grows and the groups grows, and I think many groups maybe are not as active as in the beginning, because it's a normal process. We build a new team, we collaborate in the team, and someday the process is over, the project is over, the workload is done, and then there's no more reason to keep this team. So what should you do with this group? So maybe it is clever to have an automatically process that helps you to clean up your environment. And this is with expiration policies. They are turned off by default because you maybe you assumed it. You also need Entra ID P1 or P2 license to configuration that, so they are turned off by default, and you can enable it. And as well as in the naming policy, you only have one policy for your whole environment. So before I show you the next slide, I will switch back to the Microsoft Entra ID Admin Center. So here are our groups, all of our groups, and we can see here expiration and naming policy. If you want to show the naming policy, we can have a short look. Here's the group naming policy. And you can see I have configured some characters, and all groups I will create will start with 1, 2, 3 minus and then the group name. So it's not really flexible. But now we want to talk about expiration. And you can see they are really, really short. So that's all you have to configure. So you can choose at first, what is the lifetime of a group? Well, the specific cars I will talk about in the next slide. So first we can choose. You can also configure a custom part. So maybe you only want to have 60 days. Then you can add an email for a group with no owners. So the best case, there are no groups with no owners, but maybe sometimes it happens. There's also a way to keep that away, but this will be a part of another session. So right now, keep an email contact for groups with no owners. So if the group lifetime is over, this owner will, not the owners, but this email will be informed. And at least decide what group are part of this policy. So only selected ones or all of your groups. And because of you have to add, if you choose selected ones, group by group by group, and have to configuration have to add each new group every time. It's not really automatically. So it's not really automated. So my advice is to perform this for all. And why this is my advice, I will show you. So we go back to the slide deck. So to know why this was my advice, you have to understand how the policy works. First step is we create a policy. After the policy is created, it will check all of our groups, and from this day on, every day, all of our groups. And it will prove is the group inactive or active. What this means, I will talk about in a few seconds. But if the group is active, it will automatically turns to group remains. You doesn't get any email, any notification, nothing. It automatically renews for the time you will choose, like 60 days. If it's inactive, the owner or the person we choose in our policy is notified, and they have to decide in this notification if they want to remain the group and renew them, or if they want to be that this group is deleted. Then they doesn't have to do anything. They must wait. So this maybe is good advice. Groups are renewed automatically around 35 days before they expire. So if you choose 60 days as a lifetime and the group is inactive for 25 days, they will be proved at the 35 days. And if they are still inactive, it will wait till 5 more days. And if they is active, they will be automatically renewed. So, but which actions guides a group to be automatically renewed? So, and these are basic actions. So click on a file in your Teams, show a SharePoint site, read a message in Outlook, engage, show a post in a Viva Engage community. It is, you only have to show your content. You doesn't need to add a content, add a post, add a file. Show the content is enough to renew a group. So this guides to my tips for expiration policy. Don't choose an expiration period that it's too long, because if you chose a year, it will be your group have to be inactive for nearly a year to be proved. And then if there's one owner and it is and he's asked, do you want to be do you want that this group is deleted, and he want to know, oh, which group is it? I forget all about this group, and he clicks in this group and he show maybe a Teams post, a Teams file, whatever. The group is renewed for another year. So don't choose this period too long. Keep it short, keep it simple, automatically renewed. Keep your tenant and your users and your owners safe. But if there's one mistake and a group is deleted, you can restore them like any Microsoft 365 groups for 30 days with nearly 1 or 2 clicks. But with this, there is my last advice, and this is configuration a retention policy that keeps deleted Microsoft 365 groups for 94 days and deletes them after 94 days. So they are on hold by deleting and for 94 days, and after that they will be delete permanently. But why is this my advice to you? Because if there is a SharePoint team sites, like in every Teams, there's a SharePoint team sites behind its team. And yes, you can restore the team for 30 days. But after 30 days, you can't restore them. But a team site you can restore for 93 days. So you can restore a SharePoint team site, which is based on a Microsoft 365 group without the Microsoft 365 group, because this one is deleted after 30 days. And this is a big problem, because it will have a few errors and problems in the future of the team site. So it is absolutely not recommended to do this. So if you delete a Microsoft 365 group before you delete a team site, and you have to restore the team site, restore only the files, the content, and build a completely new SharePoint team site with a new Microsoft 365 group, don't relive them. And yes, therefore, you need retention policies to keep the Microsoft 365 groups as long as your SharePoint team sites, they are also deleted. So I hope this is helpful and will maybe help you with restoring team sites. And I think with this advice, my session comes to an end. Thank you so much for being part of my first English session.